Hey guys, what's going on? It's Codiak here, and today I just wanted to kind of spitball with you guys, talk a little bit about what's going on with guilds and the raiding community, and all this sort of stuff that's happening in the game right now. I guess you could say we're rapidly approaching a lull or a negative point in the game where guilds are starting to fall apart. We've already seen that in a lot of high-end guilds. Whether it be the grind to 54 traits, the split runs, whether it be internal problems within guilds. There's a lot of things going on in the game right now and a lot of perceived negativity in the game. And I think this is what Exiled Power does so well. And it's kind of where we've settled as a team. Now, a lot of these guilds that were raiding 4 or 5 days a week realized that there was no downtime, right? And a lot of these guilds were running split runs. They were pushing their alts to get 54 traits, which is a massive task. A lot of mains don't even get that far until way down the line. I know myself being a hunter, it would have been very easy for me to get to 54 traits running Mythic pluses and raiding all the time. I just don't have that kind of time. And so I kind of took the easy route there. But if you think about all these other guilds that are requiring 4 or 5 raiders to be at least 35 traits, it's a lot of time. And I think that's the key to what's going on in Legion, is that even on paper, it seemed like a massive time sink, but nobody realized the true impact of what grinding and what RNG would do to the community. And this is kind of where I go back to my theory that RNG is great in a lot of different situations, but in terms of RNG requiring raiders to either grind for a piece of gear or a legendary, or just it's really taxing. And it comes down to this kind of mental stamina. How much mental stamina do you have as a player and as a team? And this is, again, where Exile Power kind of really settled into this nice niche of being a 2-day competitive, I put that in quotes, some people don't think we're competitive, and that's fine, raiding guild. We work hard when we're doing our 6 hours a week of raiding. We're still pushing the Mythic content. We're working on Mythic Crosis right now. We have about 80 wipes in there. And at this point, it's the time commitment to the game that's holding us back. It's not whether or not we're better players or worse players than other guilds on the server. It's a time commitment to the game. And this is something that Blizzard has been shying away from expansion to expansion, right? Part of their tactic to bring new players in was saying, oh, well, you can only play a couple hours a week and you'll still do fine, you'll still do great. And I guess that was kind of their theory with the legendary system, right? You could play, and the more you play, obviously the higher chance you have to getting a legendary. But at the same time, it still kind of offered that nugget of, oh, if you play, you'll get one eventually. And that's, I listened to the Convert to Raid podcast. Shout out to you guys. Love what you do. But a lot of those guys took a more casual approach to the game, and they're excited when they get their first or second legendary. And that's a really great feature of the game. But at the same time, at the higher end community and the Mythic community, legendaries are causing serious problems. And we talked about that in the last video with the changes in 7.2. And there is another big change coming to the legendaries in 7.2 with the spec dictating your kind of percentage chance of getting legendaries. And if you want to know more about that, check out MMO Champion and you can find all the information there. But going back to the raiding team, there is a serious problem. There's a serious problem within the guild community to, one, recruit players, to keep a raid team together, to push yourselves to the very brink of progression without falling apart. And those are 3 really challenging things, specifically in Legion. Now, it's very easy to tell in Legion when somebody is not pulling their weight, not putting as much effort in as they could be. I'm not saying should be, but could be, right? You know that RNG can Titan Forge items up to, 900 plus at this point, and that's an incentive enough. Like, your best in slot weapons and trinkets, sorry, not weapons, but trinkets and gear, and you can get those in Titan Forge situations in normal and in Mythic Plus runs and all of that stuff. So the idea that you're ever complete or done with content is a non-existent thing, because you can always be striving for that RNG piece of loot. And I think that's an inherent problem in what's going on in the community. RNG shouldn't dictate how much we play, how much time and effort we put into the game. And this is my personal philosophy. It's that the best gear in the game should come from the raiding environment. The toughest raids should offer the best incentives to play. And unfortunately, all of the things that came before that, the Mythic Plus grinding, the 54 traits, all of that stuff kind of burnt people out once they got to a great raid like the Nighthold. Now, the Nighthold is so good, except that by the time people got to the Mythic content, and even look at some of these top guilds, they're falling apart because they don't have the stamina to keep going. They don't have the the drive to keep logging on and playing, because that was kind of beat out of them through the Mythic Plus grind, through the world quests every day, just to get that chance at a legendary, just that sliver of a chance. And again, this is kind of goes back to what your team does well and where your team needs to be in a mindset. Because your team could be a 3-day progressive guild, it could be a 2-day guild like Exiled Power, you can be a casual guild. You have to understand that you push yourself further, you get yourself further towards the brink, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that, whether that be burnout, whether that be, kind of an internal conflict between raiders who think they're putting more effort in than other raiders, and that's a huge problem. And one of the ways that we kind of dealt with that in Exile Power was by saying, look guys, we are a 2-day guild. The whole idea is that we're not spending 24 hours a week in the game putting all of this time and effort into our characters. You put what you need to put into it, but at the end of the day, we're only going to get as far as we can get, and we're not going to hold each other to these insane standards of 54 traits on 3 characters, 6 alts that are ready to raid. That's just not part of what makes us a team, and what makes us, I guess you could say, successful or unsuccessful based on if you think our progress is great or not. But it keeps us together, and that's really the important part. And even through Warlords of Draenor, we had a great retention rate of our raiders. There was stuff that we could do to keep each other engaged, and part of that is only 6 hours of raiding. Now, as soon as you add a 3rd day, a 4th day, a 5th day, you start to get on each other's nerves. You start to get into this rut of, seeing each other's small little flaws, getting frustrated at those flaws because you're doing it every single day. And at 6 hours a week, we still have those problems. We still get frustrated with each other, but we kind of get those periods of relaxation and rest between each of the raid nights that allow us to kind of regenerate mentally and physically and get back in there next week and do the content. And like I said, guys, there is really no substance to this. This is just me kind of speaking my mind about what's going on. One of the big problems I've seen on the Arthas server is guilds just falling apart. There's not enough raiders to sustain kind of the goals and ambitions of a lot of the teams that were out there. My friends from Just Like You Imagine and Stormspire just had to kind of throw in the towel because there's not enough raiders that want to play the game to raid at that capacity, that level. And if you look at all of the things, even with the catch-up mechanics, and the catch-up mechanics again being added in 7.2, not much is going to change. Nothing is going to draw new players back as soon as they see that they have to grind 54 traits. They have to, get their level up to their item level up to, whatever, 905 at that point maybe. It's a daunting task. And unless Blizzard adds something like a Timeless Isle where it's so easy to get up to that item level, you're really going to see a steep decline, in my opinion, of raiders in the community. And I think you're going to see a lot of guilds either fall apart, merge, things like that. And that's just part of the way it goes. So at this point, the emphasis is on keeping your team together, keeping your raiders moving forward, and not being frustrated when you do hit a crossroads or a roadblock, because there isn't that big of a pool to pull from anymore. And some guilds, our friends, fair enough, they're doing a great job. They have some of the furthest progress in the game on Arthas right now, and they're doing some really great stuff, but they're raiding 3-4 nights a week, and there are still players that want to do that. But if you're looking at the other end of the spectrum, like Exile Power, as soon as you start to lose raiders, you kind of run into a problem, because usually 2-day raiders aren't the most progressive. They aren't the furthest along in their artifacts and things like that. So you kind of fall into a lull of recruiting. And we've already seen this. It's tough to recruit new players because there aren't that many out there that are ready to raid Mythic content that only want to raid 2 days a week. They may be behind in artifact ability, or artifact points. They may be behind in their gear. And that's a challenge that we are going to face if we lose raiders. Now, again, the key is to keep your raiders, right? You never want to lose your raiders. And sometimes you can't even prevent that. That's just part of the way it goes. But I think the bigger issue is that Blizzard is not going to generate any new playership anytime soon. New content is great, new raids, new dungeons, that's always going to bring people back. But the foundation, the systems within the game right now are so crippling to a team or a player base that wants to quickly get up to snuff because of the RNG, because of the artifacts, because of the grindiness of the game. And I know a lot of people have said that grinding is a huge issue in Legion, and I completely agree. Some people love it. Some people want to play this game, 24, 30 hours a week, and that's totally fine. But you'll find that a large portion of the community does not want to do that. And Exiled Power took kind of an interesting stance on the artifact points. You know, people were telling us, oh, you have to have 54 traits to kill Croesus. You have to, you know, and we were like, yeah, I'm sure that's going to help us. You know, we're just gonna throw ourselves at it. You know, we're not gonna mandate that players put in 30 hours a week to play their character. We're just going to go at it until we figure out the mechanics, and if we hit that DPS wall, then we deal with that. And I think that's a huge problem with a lot of guilds and guilds that are in our position, you know, 3 of 10 Mythic, and maybe guilds that are still struggling to find their identity. There's a lot of emphasis on DPS, right? And this is just me as a raid leader talking to you guys now, but 99% of the time, you'll notice that mechanics aren't there for the DPS to matter, right? So look at a fight like Croesus where, you know, obviously he's breaking the bridge. That's kind of the soft enrage and, you know, his enrage timer at 6 minutes or whatever it is. You know, if you're hitting that wall consistently, then that's one thing. But that has to only come after you're doing all of the mechanics perfectly and everybody is alive at that point. Now, is it realistic to think that every single mechanic and everybody's going to be alive at the enrage? No, that's not realistic. You know somebody's going to make a simple mistake and die. You B-res them, maybe somebody else dies, you don't have a B-res. Obviously, the goal is to be perfect, but there's so much emphasis on, oh, we don't have enough DPS. Oh, we're not doing, you know, don't worry about that. The mechanics are the key. And like I said, Blizzard designed such a great raid in the Nighthold, but the stamina, the mental fortitude isn't there to push that content. And you're seeing a lot of these guilds fall when, you know, we were doing Warlords of Draenor and pushing Hellfire Citadel and Blackrock Foundry, and there was some really tough fights in there, and people would power through. You know, we're hitting that, I think we're at 80-something wipes on Croesus. That's not even a fraction of what we wiped to on say, Mythic Gorefiend. I think we wiped 230-something times on a Mythic Gorefiend fight. So we're only at a fraction of what we wiped on some of those fights, and you're seeing teams fall apart. And you have to look at the underlying issue. The underlying issue and the foundation of the game is what's flawed, in my opinion. Now, this may be completely off base, and you guys may see something on your server that's completely different than what's happening on the Arthas server. Part of the beauty of the Arthas server is that we have a Discord team of all the raid leaders and as many of the guilds that we can convince to come join us. So we kind of keep each other, keep the communication lines going, talk about each other's guilds, talk about what's going on. And it's startling to see how many guilds have stopped raiding because of the time commitment required to play the game. And that's something that Blizzard's really going to have to work on if they want to bring back gamers in the next expansion, the next patch, whatever, because Legion had such an uptick in subscribers and player base, but once the grindiness kind of outweighed the wow, this is new factor, players left, and that's a huge issue. But yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys think. This is just me kind of spitballing, talking about what's going on the Arthas server. There's no real advice in here. I just wanted to talk to you guys about what I think is going on in the guild community and the raiding community. I would love to hear what's going on your servers. I think that's the key to this, is seeing what's happening on everybody's servers. If the scenarios are similar, if they're different, please leave me a comment below. Let us know what's going on your server, how the raiding community is reacting to all the changes being made in Legion, and how Nighthold's shaping up on your server. If you do comment below, let us know what server you're on. Kind of talk to us about your team or some of the big teams on your server. We would love to have that conversation going forward. Really give us an idea of what can change, what can be some effective change in patch 7.2 and beyond. But for now, guys, my name is Codiak, raid leader for Exiled Power. We will see you next time.